Lots of interesting things happened that we talked about with reference to FBI and all of that. But the work, them work, and the impact they had on me and my work was to make me braver, was to embolden me, was to let me know that indeed my work was supposed to be for the people and not anyone else. And they influenced through those 10 points and everything else they did a number of our organizations. I was a member, I became a founding member of an organization we called the Catalyst. And we had our own set of rules we called the Black Panther. And one of the things we said is that we recognized who we worked for. And that we would not let the structural racism get in the way of our work with the people. That we would do that, that it didn't matter what we did. It didn't matter if you got paid for it or not. Because you got paid because it was your community, because it was your neighborhood. So that philosophy has been and to be able to go on to be there in human services and to see how much of the Black Panther work can resurface in social policies. Okay. The medical clinic, the legal clinic, the child care, the breakfast programs, all of those things, really, they set the example for us. And said to us, as somebody needs to say to us again, equally as strong, what we have we need. Okay? That it is up to us to provide for us. That we may not be the cause of all of our problems. We are the only solution.
Amen.
And that we have to
Hi, I'm Stan. I don't have too much to offer except my introduction was as a reporter. I was a reporter then. I'm a reporter now. Essentially, I'm a scrubby scribe, and I was a teenager, photojournalist, not as gifted a photographer as Dawood Bey, who I believe was a member of the Black Panther Party in New York City. But around the same time where he was totally engaged, I was kind of on the periphery. I sold papers, Black Panther Party papers on 63rd and Halsted in Inglewood, while as a high schooler at South Shore with Yvette. I later wound up working at the free breakfast program, also in Inglewood. And I later, as part of my civic journalism, way that we get close to sources. You want to be in the company of folks who are primary sources. I also worked at the Free Health Clinic, the Spurgeon J. Winnage Free Health Clinic on the west side, the best side, around 16. Let's know that.
East side. East side.
16th near Glasgow. And I simply worked as a lab technician or whatever they told me to do, sweep the forest, whatever was necessary. And then I was in college at the University of Illinois, Champaign, where members of the Black Panther Party visited. And I believe you were part of that crew that came there, I think a year before I arrived, but I wound up there later. Now, during my time chronicling, both as a reporter and as a photojournalist, a lady named Afeni Shakur came to town to talk about the New York 21. How 21 people in New York, the longest trial in the history of New York, had been incarcerated. She was raising money. I wound up later as a reporter at the University of Illinois, went to New York to cover this very long trial, conspiracy to blow up Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, Mason Gimbel. There was a judge, Murtaugh, who there was some alleged threats against. They were all exonerated. It was the longest trial in history of New York.
No problem.
But ironically, I pitched this story to Ebony,
Go ahead.
which declined, and I didn't have many skills then. And some 48 years later, about 4 months ago actually, Ebony reached out to me and asked me if I would do a commemorative piece, taking a look at the 50th anniversary of maybe more of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. And of course, I always do what I'm told. And I did a piece taking a look at not just the guys, but especially the women. There were members of the Illinois Panther Party in leadership, including folks that were included in my article and folks who were not. And I felt good that I was able to at least get something out finally, though it took me 48 years.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm a pretty shy person. These kind of forums spook me out, so I'll do my best. But let me just say, I'd like to give honor to my elders, and I see one of my elders back there. She's actually a little younger than me. But I wanted to tell you, Dorothy, there's a seat up here. I want her to have a seat. She's my colleague and my longtime friend, and I saw her walk in. I wanted to bring my grandchildren with me today, 3 of them, but they were busy, and I don't get to control their life. Because I always want them to see what's possible for young people. I was a young mother, and my baby, who at the time was probably 6 months old when I joined the Panther Party, was the thing that I think got me into the party, because they were intrigued by a young woman who would bring her 6-month-old baby to the Black Panther office. And so they immediately gave me a stack of newspapers, and I had to prove my wear by selling Black Panther newspapers on the west side of Chicago. West side.
Okay.
I was a student at Crane Junior College at the time in 1968, so my colleagues were the revolutionaries in the city. And I'm proud to say that the West Side College or Crane Junior College housed a badass group of revolutionaries in the city, from Stan Willis to Henry English to Willie Calvin, the ones that you've mentioned, and many more. So I was bathed in the midst of all of these people. I ended up going to Grand Junior College because I was a teen parent, and I probably had limited options to go to college, and my mother said, "You're going to go to college." And she said, "You're going to go to Crane." It was in my neighborhood, so I went to Crane. I remember one day we were all sort of recruited to go to a rally at the church on Ashland and Washington for the Black Panthers. It was a Black Panther rally. And I had my little baby with me, and we went to this rally. And I was young, impressionable. We had come to Chicago. I'm originally from Michigan. We had come to Chicago a couple of years earlier. My mother lived here, and we came to visit her the year that Martin Luther King was here, and they were protesting the Willis wagons. So my first sort of entree into sort of civil rights protests was through the Willis wagons. But I was a high school student, and I probably didn't know a whole lot. But when I got to Crane Junior College, we had a little corner on the second floor of the high school that was devoted to the college students. And that's where all of sort of the organizing happened. So there were some students playing big whist in one corner, there were some students watching Dark Shadows in another corner. There was an even bigger crowd of students who were very alert to the organizing that was happening, both in terms of sort of the Chicago community as well as around the campus. The college gave us a great opportunity to sort of organize. I remember when we wanted to change the name of the college, we said we refuse to have a name of someone who builds toilets. Crane College was named after Richard T. Crane, who owned toilets. And we weren't going to have that. And I think we got quite a bit of pushback from the city college around Malcolm X. But the timing was great. The timing was great for us. So I remember going to a rally, and I remember the speaker was ferocious and strong, and I was so impressed. And he said, "We want you to come and join. Please come and join the party. Come to the office. Anybody in the room, any black person in the room that wants to be a member of the Black Panther Party, you're welcome to come and join." And I thought, I'm a little bit too, I might not be able to pass the test. But I went to the office, I took my birth certificate. My birth certificate and my ID, and I was good to go. And the person who said, if you're too light, bring your ID. When I got there with my ID, he was kind of like, where the hell did she come from? She got a birth certificate. But it really was a place that bathed me in the radical revolutionary movement, not only of that time, but of times since then. And so my life, though, I always tell people I wasn't a leader of anything, but I was a hell of a foot soldier. And I believe in showing up and participating and getting my whole family involved. My children were involved, and my grandchildren now are involved. And so I always believe that it's important that it's a family thing. My mother used to cook chicken for the Panthers, and so we all were engaged in the movement of the time, and since that time.
Mary, I think I want to stay with you and then just send the talking stick back towards me. But before I ask this question, I just want to ask if any of our Rebuild colleagues can hear me. Can we bring some chairs down so that we can just have more people seating? And I also want to let people know if it's, cumbersome to stand or you're willing to sit, there are two very luxurious settees or reclining places on either side. We're lucky to be able to enjoy these beautiful pieces straight out of the lobby of the Johnson Publishing Company. I remember a couple of times being able, when they were thinking about doing some metadata stuff back in the day, and I was a librarian, I was invited to go in there and look at that treasure trove of images that they had. And I remember making sure I sat down, even though I didn't need to, on these very same pieces. And it's just a blessing. It talks to how amazing Chicago is when it comes to assets, and we would have the opportunity to sit on these pieces and to enjoy the genius, that was John H. Johnson and Eunice Johnson. So definitely, if for nothing, even if you do want to stand, I would just sit down anyway, because how long will we have this opportunity? I don't know. But I do hope some chairs can be brought down. So I wanted to, this is an extraordinary opportunity for us to hear about day-to-day life. And all of you have spoken to the point that the Panthers were very young when they formed the party. I remember Emory saying that if you were in your 20s and you were joining the party, you were older. You were one of the older members. And Emory also told me that one of the main reasons why they wanted to recruit Eldridge Cleaver to the party is because he had his own apartment. And it meant that they could print some of the newspapers on his kitchen table. They could print all night if they wanted to. So I want to ask a question about that, but I also want to honor the ancestors as well. And I want to have an opportunity to have you speak your names into the room. And the reason why I'm holding this mask, and the reason why we came on the opening, you saw a lot of shrines and altars on in this exhibition is because we do know that not only are we honoring the ancestors, but when Huey sat in that chair, in that peacock rattan chair, with a gun in one hand and a spear in another, he was paying homage to African liberation and to the new African republics, which is why you have ministers of education, ministers of culture. They were looking at what was happening across the Atlantic and kept that relationship going, you know, even getting exiled, gaining opportunity. I think it was Nkrumah who, not Nkrumah, but it was in Tanzania where they got, you know, a lot of Panther Party members were given exile and for a long time, even with the PLO too, Palestinian Liberation Organization. So there was a lot of connection there. But one of the things that this was a mass that we just took down as we will get ready to dismantle the show. And so I want to kind of ask you all to either talk about a day in the life of the Panthers, just something that you remember that stands out to you, or to speak to that influence of what it was like to be in the party at the time when we did see the beginning of these new African republics. And I just came back from Haiti this morning, right? So, you know, being in Haiti and coming, knowing I was coming to this, and being in a place which is, I think, one of our first Black republics, 1871, I think, something like that. It is, you know, I'm a changed person. And I wanted you, so maybe two of you can take a day in the life, and the other two can maybe talk about the influence of what was happening at that time. And Mary, why don't we start with you?
So I was living on the west side of Chicago, on Kedzie, and remember, 68, it's like, I'm 68 this year, and that was 1968. I was like, whoa. And it was right, you know, after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And so the west side was hot for a lot of reasons. I mean, the west side was hot. And there was the politics was potent. And the oppression was potent. And so I feel like I was in a faith in sort of that atmosphere. I was also a college student, and I was very serious about being a college student. I was determined that I was going to prove the critics wrong, that a young Black girl who was pregnant, had a baby, couldn't make it in the world. And so I was very serious about education. And so when I got to Crane Junior College, I found, and I'm sorry you were not one of my teachers, but I found that the teachers that I had, some of them are still around. B. Bumpkin is 100 years old. B. Bumpkin was my math teacher at Crane Junior College. That infused, she's a rebel, infused in all of our education was a heavy dose of the politics of the day. So even my biology class was heavily dosed with the politics of the day. So I feel like I was a very lucky student. Alice Palmer was one of my professors. I was very lucky to be there, and they received the Black Panthers. And so there was a marriage between my education and my involvement in the Black Panther Party. So I would go in, I sold newspapers, and I worked in the breakfast program. And I lived on the west side, and I used to walk from Kedzie and Franklin Boulevard to 16th and Pulaski to the breakfast program. And I put my baby in the stroller, and we walked up and down the street, and she sold them newspapers. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, okay. And so I got a lot of energy with that, because I got a lot of affirmation from people, and I got a lot of affirmation from the Black Panthers about being a young woman, a young mother, involved in the movement. So I would say a day was spent between the breakfast program and going to the office on Madison. You know, I don't know how much, I have memories. I have lots of memories of that second floor office and mayor's office was in the back. And a lot of my friends were members of the party. My roommate at the time, we lived and then we moved to Douglas Park. We've actually moved in Prexy Nesbitt's building, and I remember a precinct captain coming around asking us to vote. You know, Chicago politics in those days were really nasty. And I said, Prexy looked at me and I said, I don't vote, I'm a communist. and I know that we used to, I mean, the dress was really something. I mean, I was very proud to wear my blue jeans every day for weeks without washing them. And my black combat boots and my black, I still wear turtleneck shirts and my black leather jacket and my black beret. I still wear berets. I remember I was inducted into the into the Student Honor Society, and they had a very elegant dinner, and the Black Panthers, we all went in our Black Panther garb, so we're not dressing up for this shit. But it was very empowering, and I think that, you know, I learned a lot. We were literate. We were very literate. We read a lot about the revolution. I worked in the bookstore at the college, and I have my oldest friend in the city who also worked with me, and we just celebrated New Year's together. We reminisced about working in the bookstore, so we had every revolutionary book. I did have my roommate's cousin, who we encouraged to leave Bradley University and join the party, and came back. He eventually was shot by the police. And so we did have a few of our friends that, you know, were killed by the police. But I don't think we had a sense of how dangerous our life was. Because we were very passionate about, and we thought that the revolution was going to come. Didn't we think the revolution was going to come soon? We thought it was coming. We thought it was coming. We didn't think that we had to wait. And so we were very passionate about making sure that people knew. And I did not have a lot of people. I think my daughter, again, helped a lot. I didn't have a lot of people who were resistant to the message. That people were very impressed that a young woman with a child would be out there. All right. Just thinking about what you said about the day and the night, the Black Panther Party. For me, it was, like you were saying, both of my kids were born while I was in the party. And it did not hinder me from doing my work, because by the time the kids came, we had several apartments around on the west side, and we all doubled up, and most of us had, not most, but several of the women had children while they were there, and you strap them on your back or put them in the front or whatever, and you keep doing what you had to do. One of the things I wanted to also say about the Black Panther Party was that Fred was a visionary, and his idea was to connect with other organizations, other groups, with Slim, with the Young Patriots. There was another group of Latinos, the Young Lords, who were there, and Fred made connections with all of those people, and they became part of our entourage, and we became part of theirs. The other thing that Fred had me to do, he wanted me to, because I lived on the south side prior to coming to the party, his idea was he wanted to politicize the disciples. And Jeff Ford, but that didn't go anywhere. We had a meeting over at what was the museum at that time, and they came in there packing guns
But it never got to that point. But the relationships that we were able to develop with organizations around the country and around the city as well. Fred said, since you on the south side, why don't you go and politicize the groups there? So I did. And one of the things that was really important to me was finding out that William O'Neill turned out to be the federal spy that was inserted into the party. And his girlfriend lived, we all lived in the same apartment. And I remember coming home from political education class, and there's a big hole in the wall. And I found out that he had taken, her name was Stephanie, he had taken Stephanie's head and crashed her into that wall, busting a hole in the wall. Very strange guy, very, very, very strange guy. But for some reason, he worked his way up through the ranks of the Black Panther Party and was allowed to deal with a lot of the circumstances that the party was trying to get involved with. I was pregnant at the time that O'Neill was on the set with my girlfriend, but there was always something about him that was a little offbeat, just a little bit offbeat. And I remember on the day that Fred was murdered, he was at the office and he was hungry. And William O'Neill went out to get food for Fred. And when Fred came back, he ate it. And we think after the police bombarded his house and killed him, one of the reasons his wife at the time said that she kept trying to wake him up. He had been drugged. That never came out, but he had been drugged, which was why he could not really sit up and respond. You know, all he could do was just look. You know, it was interesting because I had a car back then, and I had gone over to Fred's house, and there was a meeting of several groups of Panthers who were around in Illinois at the time, and there was I guess you could say a gathering of these different representatives from different Panther organizations around the state. And so I went over to the house. I said, "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I said, "I guess you're going to sleep on the floor." I said, "Well, I'm not doing that because I'm not sleeping on the floor. It's too crowded. Wasn't no floor to sleep on, quite frankly." And a friend of mine, another party person, Beverlina and several others, they were going back to the south side. So I said, "Well, I'm gonna go to your house and we can just come back here in the morning." And when I went to the Breakfast for Children program the next morning, I got a call from one of the ladies at the house and said, "You got to come now, Fred's been killed." And so I left the Breakfast for Children program and everybody went to his house, and it was amazing. The whole community was out in front of that house, chanting and singing and praising Fred and saying we'll do whatever we can do to help rebuild the organization. So it gets a little teary-eyed for me because we spent a lot of time together, Fred and I. You know, like I said, he would drag me around to be the woman's the woman's spirit. One other thing that we talked a lot about, when Fred went to jail, there was this guy, his name was Trulock. And Trulock came and said that he had been in prison with Fred, and Fred had told him to come to the party and help. He was another provocateur who had been placed, now he had been in jail, and Fred sent a message to me, and because I was a field lieutenant at the time, he sent a message saying, Trulock don't run nothing but his mouth, get rid of him. And so they got rid of him. Fred was like, get rid of him. You know, Fred was in jail for supposedly stealing ice cream bars out of a truck, which of course was complete BS, just complete BS. I'll just close by saying that the environment for the party was, there were all kinds of people who were in the party. I went to what was then was Crane for, and then changed to Malcolm X. But Fred said, you're going to have to come on out of there because we got something else to do. I was like, okay, all right. And there were times when we traveled. I went to Jamaica. I think it was Jamaica. Fred said, I need you to go to Jamaica. I said, okay, I'll go there. And I only stayed there for a couple of days. I was supposed to have been meeting with somebody, but they never showed. And I went to Canada with the, I need you to go to Canada and do this, that, and the other. So it was a very interesting few years for all of us. And we have all remained, especially since these different forums have been taking place here, it gave us a chance to reconnect with everybody and start talking about what do we want to do now. We don't have to necessarily be the Black Panther Party anymore, but we need to be still taking part in reflecting on our people and what we need to be doing as a group of people so that we can have more information about ourselves. It was amazing how many of our young people at our Breakfast with Children program if they weren't light-skinned, they felt like, But that was the way it was then, and make a better situation for our young people, for our elderly people. When Fred's body was brought out of the house, the police were around trying to arrest people because people were really just trying to crash into the house to see what was going on. Mark Clark was there from down further, and he was killed. China Doll, she wasn't killed, but she lost the use of one of her hands because she was shot. I always think about how blessed I was, because if I had not left because I didn't want to sleep on the floor, I would have been in that house. I also know I started getting phone calls from relatives who said, what are you doing? I said, what you talking about? Said, there's people been coming over here calling and want to know where you are and what you're doing. I said, well, who were they? And come to find out, it was the police. They were trying to find out what was going on. Because things, after Fred was murdered, it kind of leveled off in terms of being out on the forefront. But we did have really strong support from the community there. And they came every day that they were out there every day for at least a couple of weeks. They came, they came.
I think that, I wasn't a member, so I'm not commenting from that standpoint. I want to comment from the standpoint of what the Black Panther Party did for our collective psyche. Many of us, probably from the point that we were children and we first started learning about our history, before most of us that learning began with slavery. They never teach us anything before then. It was like our whole thing was around slavery. And for many of us, it created a sense of shame. Shame the way we were depicted. And shame because we wonder why we didn't fight. Because we were never taught anything about resistance. All of those resistance movements that happened, we didn't know a thing about them. Okay? And so we had these kinds of images. And we were looking for heroes. And we always were, in our identity movements, we're always looking for a way that we can define ourselves as kings and queens that we were. That we can define ourselves as people who have agency over themselves and over their own bodies and over their own lives. And so, I'm going to say this in a very personal way. Because I came up in high school in Kentucky in the Civil Rights Movement. And whereas you're trying to assert your humanity, often it was put in a frame of integration, as though that was the only way that you could be somebody. Okay, so we're searching around for a new way to define ourselves. And I will absolutely never forget the day that the Black Panther Party stood on those steps in California with those weapons, saying, hey, we're not taking it, we're not this, we're not. And I said, finally, I got some heroes. Okay? I got somebody who's saying, we don't have to take this, and we're not going to. And we don't mind putting ourselves on the line for it. We don't mind being out there, because that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to stand in this gap. We're going to have to take what's ours. We're going to have to do this a different way. We don't need to be begging nobody, can we eat lunch? Where they ate lunch, and all of these other ways, things that had a demeaning impact on your sense of self. So for some of us coming up, I will never forget when I went to college, because I went to jail in high school, and then I went in college when I was in Nashville. And we spent a couple weeks, and we were getting out around Mother's Day. And I said, and I have lived up to this, that I would never sing We Shall Overcome again in my life. I didn't care what happened. I wasn't singing. It wasn't singing and swaying and praying that was going to do this for us. It was something much stronger that it was going to take. So the Black Panther Party, whether you were in it or not, it made you prouder. It made you bolder. It made you feel like, hey, some brothers is going to take up us and stand up. They impacted the approaches of all the other organizations. They impacted how the brothers acted. They impacted everything that was going on. So your dress, your demeanor, your what you're up against the wall, motherfuckers, and then the rest of that, we love it. Okay? It helped us feel empowered. And it informed other organizations that made them bolder. So some organizations that would have maybe taken a more conservative bent, they began to, their consciousness began to raise, they began to be radicalized. They began to take on more. And this thing about the reading, we was some reading, so-and-so. Okay? You have to read this in the party, that's number one. But everybody else did. And I remember they were going to do just the scan thing. We're going to work with everybody who's about revolution. And we have to look at how to bring this thing about. So you had Slim Coleman, guys in Uptown, through the Young Patriots, you had the Young Lords, you had some Native Americans, as well as African Americans. And this was mirrored in the first iteration of the Center for Inner City Studies, which was where I learned to work after I left training. The Center for Inner City Studies, and Northeast and all of you know it all over the world. And And you may think of it only as a black thing. But when it started, it had 7 tracks. Okay? It was about working in the inner city. It was designed for people who were working in the inner city. It had a Southern Mountain Appalachian track. It had a Latino track. It had a Native American track and an African American. So all of those were part of this. And you had to work both in a scholarly sense and in an active community sense. So we were working on the west side with New Breed and Bobby Moore, with everybody over there. We were working on the south side with the Blackstone Nation and so forth and so on, because there were to be no lines drawn between you and the people. If you were, you are not, very evidently not part of the solution.
I can't tell you much about day-to-day activities. I can tell you thematically something that certainly stood out to me was certainly internationalization that seemed to be apparent. A sense of resistance, a sense of community, the tri-continental connection with Africa, Asia, and the Americas. I know that there was an exhibit here that Marguerite Horberg curated that connected the dots, not unlike how the Black Panthers connected the dots. In the day-to-day operations, as Joe could probably verify, at the political education classes, you see folks with the red book, Chairman Mao's red book, in one pocket, and they'd have Franz Fanon's Regiment of the Earth in the other pocket. So there was a constant connection with resistance movements, Israel-Palestine, what was happening in Vietnam at that time, oppressed peoples of the world then and now. And when I did a piece for Ebony, taking a look at the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, those same international connections, that same sense of resistance, that same sense of community was apparent then and certainly now. And the dozen or so Panthers that I talked to all reflected on that. As they looked at 5 decades of how there was a fascist in place then, and there's a fascist in place now, and how these local, national, and international stories are symbiotically linked. These local, national.
Specific question after we do what we're about to do about your journalism and about your leadership of cultural institutions. Dr. Adams is saying, but also in the ways in which you've also led municipal organizations, state organizations, and then finally, Mary, about your legacy in terms of cultural work and how that has become a family legacy. But before we do that, because first of all, let me just stop and say, how many of you are just happy that you decided to come? I'm happy too, because I think some of the stories that you're sharing, you know, they're in your heart and in your brain. And for many of us, you know, we're hearing it, you know, for the first time, and to be able to just appreciate your candor and how illustrative this conversation is, you know, especially as we think a little bit about. I'll just say this: turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor.
Neighbors.
Don't be an infiltrator.
Don't be an infiltrator.
Say, turn to your other neighbor.
Neighbor.
And say, neighbor, don't be an informant.
Don't be an informant.
Turn to the person in the back.
Turn to the person in the back. Okay, I'm not sure how that goes. Ain't nobody got time for that.
All right. The other thing before we're going to open it up, and we're going to take about 3 questions. Because I would think that whenever you know, you come to something like this, there are people who come with burning questions, and you have an opportunity to ask it. And the emphasis is going to be on questions, because we'll have a little bit of a testimony service at the end. Anyone else who was active in supporting Panthers in the House that can stand and we can just recognize you. All right, absolutely. And so we would not be here without the Panthers and the work that they have done. And so we won't forget, we will never forget that. And we owe a debt of gratitude to all of you and everyone who's continued to work. And so we're going to take 3 or so questions. And if you want to ask a question, just stand up and be loud. And okay, so we have 1, and then the person behind 2, and then we have 3. So we have our first 3 questions. And if we can get to more, we'll do so. And what I'm going to ask the panelists to do is if at least 1, of course, but maybe no more than 2, answer the question. We can then, as opposed to going in a chain. Okay, so the first one, you have your hat on. If you can say your name and then ask your question.
Sure. My name is SEPIA, and I'm a recent graduate of Mountain College, actually. And that's where I actually learned more about the work that the Black Panther Party did, especially when it came to public health, because I took a community health program. And I wanted to know if anyone can actually talk more about, how the initiative of the public health program, especially 3 clinics, actually got started and spread.
I can respond to that. It was Fred's vision that we needed to be serving our community in whatever way that we could. So that's how the Breakfast for Children program came about. That's how the free health clinic came about. And we had a law office. I can't remember their name. Anyway, so those were the different entities that were supporting the Panthers and helping them to deliver on the Central College. And I think you were at another college near there.
George Williams.
Yeah, George Williams. And some kind of way we connected. And he said it was him who really got me politicized about getting active in the community because he was doing community activities. And he had me and a couple of other his friends. We were going around in the neighborhoods in that area and knocking on their doors and trying to give them information about what racism was and all of that. And if it hadn't been for Kugler, I probably would have stayed at North Central and graduated.
One thing I just want to say very quickly about why we're ending with this panel and thinking about social institutions, thinking about the Panthers and the work they do with spatial justice too, and talking about, housing inequity, and a lot of housing policy, especially discrimination policy, and also breakfast program. But also I am a beneficiary too of the Watts Health Clinic. I was born after the riots, and the Watts pretty much stayed decimated until I went to college. We didn't have a grocery store at all when I was growing up. But I also thank the Panthers because they instituted widespread sickle cell testing. And that's when I found out, I'm not active with sickle cell disease, but I did find out I was a carrier. And so I was able to talk to doctors early on about why my red blood count was so low. When of course people see that and they want to, say everything else is going on. So I think one of the things that, as we think about public health, my aunt, who was also politicized by the Panthers in Los Angeles, went on to become in the first class of folks in Los Angeles of nurses who would go on to get what is now the MPH, the Master's of Public Health degree. So in Los Angeles in particular, and I also know that a lot of Panthers have talked to, what you talked about, is that with the rise of the health clinics, the free health clinics, and public health, which I think the Panthers had so much to do with creating sort of that framework, and then also to the breakfast program, because I think a lot of the Panthers, we had over 75 opening weekend. And one of the things that they talked about is Chairman Fred's emphasis on eradicating illiteracy in our community. Emory's use of iconography, which is very connected, if you look at his work, to what was happening in Africa, to make sure that paintings and artwork could be read like text, because many of the people in the community that they wanted to reach also had low or limited literacy. I think if we begin to kind of look at the free breakfast program, all these programs, we put together the 6 or 7 programs, free law clinics, etc. We sort of see in a lot of ways that even though they haven't been acknowledged as so many of the panelists have said, the Panthers made the radical framework, created the rubrics of things that are now foundational to even the things we're fighting for now. So I really think that's important, that question that you're asking about public health. And I don't know, there are dissertations right now that are taking this on, but I would think that you could write probably 4 or 5 dissertations around what the Panthers were doing and how they were organizing with very limited resources, things that will become, you know, as we know now, what fundamental to what we think about when we think about a free democracy. But maybe we can go to our second question, and we'll line up our second and our third, and we'll be able to answer them together. Yes.
My question is, being that this is the headquarters of the Nation of Islam in Chicago, does the Black Panther Party have any engagement with the Nation of Islam? And philosophically, why did the Panther have, why did they embrace Mao so much? Like, what did Mao mean for the Black Panther Party? And why they didn't leak so much of with Cuba?
There was a lot of pushback among some of the Panthers about the whole Mao Zedong. We had to read the Red Book, and we had to read Frantz Fanon's books. But so it was just so that we could find out what was going on in these various different arenas. It wasn't about embracing what the Red Book had to offer, but it was Fred's idea. We need to read everything that we could read about what was going on in our communities or around the world.
For people who are unfamiliar, somebody's asking, for people who are unfamiliar with Mao Zedong, with the Red Book, and also too with Frantz Fanon and his work, can someone just give a very quick, you know, just overview? And I know that's very hard because both of these books are, as we know, very generative. But can someone say one word about each?
Sure. Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon was essentially a look at the psychology of oppression. It was written by Martinican psychiatrist who later wound up being the theoretician for the Algerian Revolution in this North African nation 5 decades ago. So he was a psychiatrist. He was talking about the psychology of oppression and how to fight back. So it became a kind of theoretical framework for resistance. So it was very key. It was foundational. So that's the way I can explain it.
Let me also say that there was I would say, Joe, that it was beyond a cursory review of the Red Book. And that you have to think not just of the Illinois Black Panther Party, but the Black Panther Party as a whole. What became an issue in our community was class versus race. And the idea that these issues were class issues was what the Black Panther Party was pushing. Don't think just so much about skin color. Think about the oppression of people throughout of various colors and understand our solidarity with these people. Read this and understand this. And so it got to the point where there were some all-out battles, you know, literally and figuratively over these issues at meetings and what have you, because we would go everywhere to meet and talk about the struggle and talk about our people and what have you. And so there was some derisive comments on the Panther side. They would say the pork chop nationalists, the people that said just this and that and the other, and there was, you know, the other famous or infamous confrontation between us, Karenga's organization and the Black Panther Party, often over issues of race. And the Black Panther Party thought that the nationalist approach was very limited and very limited, and that we needed to look at this in a much more global fashion and not to ignore the role that class played in this as well.
Well, all I can say is I remember, again, being a student at Crane Junior College at the time, it was still Crane, that in that little corner on the second floor, every political persuasion of Black people existed.
That's right.
And we battled around our different perspectives. So there were members of the Nation of Islam, there were cultural nationalists, there were Black Panthers, and I remember the leaders, Henry English and Stan Willis, who were sort of Black student leaders of the college at the time, sort of did not join any of these particular organizations in order to sort of stay capable of mediating a lot of the differences. And I would say that for me, I mean, you know, I remember, you know, we carried that little red book, but I learned about international, I was able to sort of connect what was going on the west side of Chicago to other international issues around the world. I don't think I would have gotten that from other sort of ways of learning about politics. And I think the Panthers sort of forcing us, pushing us, encouraging us to read this text. You know, as young people, you know, sometimes we didn't know what we were reading, but we were able to sort of make these international connections. And sometimes some of that didn't resonate with us until many years later.
I think you have to get up and explain the dialogue.
I wanted to, you touched on a really important part, I think, is our ability as a community to save ourselves. And I think for a long time, the last couple of decades, we've been waiting for somebody to save us. And I think we're slowly getting to that piece where we're ready to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I don't think we've quite gotten there yet. And so I just want to know from you guys, what do you think is missing? And why we haven't kind of hit that revolutionary peak where we're able to mobilize, maybe not become the Black Panthers, I know the new Black Panthers is a thing, but why do you think we haven't been able to reach that pinnacle yet, and what do you think we need to do to be able to get there?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good one.
Have another Monday.
Yeah.
You know, I like the phrase of need to continue. That means the struggle continues. I think that a lot of people believe that the struggle has a beginning and an end. And think that when certain things happen, that, oh, well, we solved that. We got that.
Young, you think it's going to go quickly.
Instead of understanding that you have to fight as hard to maintain the game as you do to get it. And then it is ongoing, and then it is continuous, and it is no stopping. There's no real okay? And there's no success, and that individual success cannot outstrip collective progress. So the fact that during that period, more people were given certain opportunities to come through, if you will, to get certain kinds of positions, to be represented in certain places, to be elected to certain offices, and all of that. All of those things that we fought for collectively, no matter what group you were in. I think that the notion that somehow you've arrived at a destination keeps us starting all over again. Far too long. Okay. I think to your point about the Nation of Islam, Chicago is a special place where a whole lot of things get started, and where we're able to work together no matter which thing we're in. We sort of crossed over into various things. So you could go to the mosque on Sunday, you can hang out with the Hebrews, you could go to something like that, you could go to Africa, you could do this, you could do that. As long as we were in this thing together, it was okay with us. And as long as we were, it was moving us forward. It was propelling us. It was creating an imagery and a commitment that had to show forth in the work. And I think that's what Tracy is really asking of us today, is how do this continue in the work? And it continued in the work through people forming particular kind of organizations. Through Black people have their own social service agencies that they have not had since right after slavery. New kinds of things starting, new levels of commitment, new levels of expectation of each other, and willingness to hold each other accountable. Because I think sometimes when we don't want to do that, we miss out too. So these things are multi-layered in their responses, but that's just my 2 cents.
It's good 2 cents.
Okay, I think, so what we're going to do is I think we're going to take one more question, one quick question. We can only have time for one, and then we're going to close. And then that way, those of you who can still be here, we have some programming that will follow. and you also have an opportunity to look at the art, because I think that one of the main institutions that comes out, or I think the connection between the Black Power movement and the Black arts movement is what made, I think, this time so, to the point of the last question,